introduced legislation to pause all immigration until we've gotten our house in order to stop what is happening to this great country and this great state. To be very clear, when you talk to the experts, the Muslim Brotherhood has a specific plan to Islamify the state of Texas. You're seeing it unfold in Dallas-Fort Worth right now. There are no-go zones where women don't want to go here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. There are people that are listening to prayer calls. We are having to deal with a massive change in our culture because we haven't recognized that there is a war being carried against us. If you're Attorney General, you have enormous power to follow the money. And as Attorney General, I will go after the 600 plus organizations that are advancing Sharia, undermining Western civilization, using the full power of the Office of Attorney General.
Thank you, Congressman. Senator Huffman?
Yes, and definitely Sharia law and its infiltration into our state is a problem. And it's something that I recognize. We hear a lot of talk about it, and yes, I'm going to do something about it. Actually saw this problem in 2019, and I passed the first bill in Texas that said there could be no foreign law, Sharia law included, in our family courts. And that law has been upheld recently by the Texas Supreme Court. So a lot of people can talk about things they're going to do and suddenly start paying attention to an issue. But this is not a problem that has just developed overnight. It is something that has been kind of insidious, working its way into our culture. I think we have to take all measures, legal measures that we have. As Attorney General, I will do that. I have proven that as a legislator, as a senator, and as the Attorney General, I would use all tools at my disposal to go after these organizations that are promoting Sharia law in our state.
Thank you. Senator Middleton.
Thank you. Let me begin with this. This is not a religious liberties issue. This is an America First issue because Sharia law is organized crime, period, and I will treat it as such. And we have some very powerful tools here that I have fought for, like Senate Bill 17, that stops enemy entities, which CARE and Muslim Brotherhood are. Appreciate Governor Abbott and his efforts and that Lieutenant Governor Patrick to make that happen. And it allows the AG to bring action to sue and force them to sell any property that they own. So we cannot allow these Islamic organizations, Sharia law pushers, to own 1 square inch of Texas. We also have to make sure that the meadow nearby to here remains just that, a meadow. And these are seditious organizations which are attempting to undermine our constitutional republic by threat or force, and I will treat it as such and dissolve them.
Thank you. Minnesota recently faced national scrutiny after independent journalists uncovered nearly $1 billion in fraud committed largely by Somali immigrants. As Attorney General, what steps will you take to strengthen oversight and prevent similar instances of fraud in Texas? Congressman Roy.
Well, it's a great question. It's one that I've already started working on. I've been working closely with Treasury Secretary Bessent and the great leadership of the Trump administration to follow the money, as I said before. Again, one of the core and central powers of the Office of the Attorney General is to do that. And these vast networks that are engaged in funneling money into our country need to be explored, and they need to be rooted out, and we need to follow the money. But you've got to actually be serious about prosecuting and going after fraud. And we've got obviously divisions that go after Medicaid fraud and other issues, but we've got to actually heighten and ensure that we've got all of the tools necessary with our law enforcement function to root out fraud at the highest level in the Office of Attorney General. But going back to the issue of following the money, that is the core issue for the state of Texas. How is it that we have let this vast number of organizations infiltrate the state of Texas and throughout our country and be able to continue to exercise what they're doing with our taxpayer money?
Thank you. Senator.
Well, I have a lot of knowledge about this issue because as Chair of Finance, I have watched the billions being fed into the Medicaid system, into the child care system and so forth. And we have ways that we have the Office of Inspector General, we have ways that we are monitoring the money, but there has not been, in my opinion, a full-fledged effort from the Attorney General's office to make that a top priority. It would be, because it's a crime, and it would be a top priority of mine to work with local law enforcement, with local prosecutors, with the federal government to do an extensive investigation and prosecutions of anyone who is involved in any level of fraud, much less the type that we have seen in Minnesota. I do not think in Texas that we will see the level of theft and graft that we've seen in Minnesota, because we know the politicians were turning a blind eye. I think in Texas it's going to be deeper, but we're going to have an all-out effort to uncover it.
Senator Middleton.
Well, look, here's the bottom line. Government doesn't have any money. It's all taxpayer money. That's what they're stealing from us, and we love eliminating this from the budget, right? Waste, fraud, and abuse, but we need to hold those accountable that have committed the waste and the fraud and the abuse, and I'm already in the fight to do exactly that. Food stamps. And it won't surprise anyone, there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse related to food stamps. I took on the big soda lobby and stopped soda and candy from being included in the taxpayer-funded food stamp program, eliminating billions of dollars per year in waste, fraud, and abuse. Right? We know taxpayer-funded junk food turns into taxpayer-funded health care. This is common sense stuff. But they're stealing from us, and they're cycling it through these nonprofits, largely by George Soros-related entities, right? He's behind a lot of this. And on day one in office, I will investigate George Soros for the crimes I believe he's committed against our great state.
Mr. Reitz.
Just on the sheer scale of the Texas population and the size of our economy, if we thought that the Somalian Quality Leering Center fraud was bad in Minnesota, I have reason to believe that it's 100 times worse here in Texas. The Attorney General has two major powers that he can do to wipe out the fraud, waste, and abuse that's happening right now in Texas. Number one are the dozens of different divisions in the Attorney General's office that are already recuperating hundreds of millions of dollars for the state of Texas under Ken Paxton's leadership. The second most important tool is the newly created in the Justice Department under President Trump of a national fraud czar at the Justice Department. As someone who just came from the Justice Department, has already been vetted for senior leadership at the Justice Department, I'm uniquely positioned to not only take the reins of the AG's office, but to partner with the Trump administration, because on my watch, there will never be a quality leering center in Texas.
Now we'll turn to illegal immigration and border security. Under the Biden administration, the federal government failed to adequately secure Texas's border. If you are Attorney General under a future Democratic presidential administration, what steps will you take to ensure Texas can exercise the right to protect its own border? Senator Huffman.
Well, we have put several laws in place that we didn't have in place when Biden was president. And we were so overwhelmed by the millions crossing the border in Texas that we reacted, but our reaction was probably a little slower than it should have been. But we learned from that assault and that invasion at our southern border. And I think now we have the facilities in place. We know what it takes. We have passed laws, the sanctuary cities laws. We passed a law that is still in the courts, but would allow us to round up those who are there illegally, present them to the border, at the border for deportation. But we also passed the trespass laws. We built facilities to house those who had immediately crossed the border. If there was another Democratic president, I would be ready on day one, because that would come in 2 years. We would see it coming, we would be ready, and we've learned these lessons, and I was right there as we were learning them, and we would be on the ground ready to fight from day one.
Senator Middleton.
Texas was under an invasion for 4 years, and we have, as a state, a constitutional right to repel that invasion. It's in the state constitution and the federal, and we have some very powerful tools to do exactly that. One of them was a Freedom Caucus priority. It's called the ban on sanctuary cities. Anyone that is in the way of President Trump's deportation agenda, blocking ICE, things like you're seeing in Minnesota, guess what? The AG can sue them for 3 things, and I will. Number 1, civil penalties. Number 2, criminal penalties. Number 3, removal from office. And that also includes when they're not cooperating with the 287G program, the ICE detainer program, which we required every county in Texas to participate in. But even more powerful than that, when we saw the federal government fail on their job in Joe Biden's administration, we created the state's deportation law, where the state can charge illegal immigrants with criminal trespass and return them to country of origin. And that's exactly what we have to do to defend ourselves.
Mr. Wright.
You don't have to wonder what I'm going to do when there's a Democratic administration. You can already look at my record. I served as Attorney General Paxton's deputy and offensive coordinator during the duration of the Biden invasion. And of the 46 lawsuits that I brought against the 46th president, that's Auto Pen Joe Biden, a third of those were on border security, litigating to secure the border and deport illegal aliens. It's that winning legal record that led the National Border Patrol Council to endorse me as the next Attorney General of Texas. I think it's extraordinary that my opponents on stage are doing exactly what I predicted they would do during my opening statement, and that is to give a litany of various bills worked on, as though what's needed are just more laws. But we knew that when Trump took the White House, we didn't need new laws. We just needed somebody to step up and enforce those laws. And everybody on this stage is going to say, I'm going to secure the border. I'm going to fight a Democratic administration. But for me, I'm the only one who has actually done it.
Congressman.
Well, as First Assistant Attorney General in 2015, we took Obama to court and beat him on deferred action. So some of us have in fact been there and won on these important issues. We litigated on Syrian refugees. We fought at every single turn. And then in Congress, I've led the fight, built a coalition that we had the entire Texas delegation getting behind a Texas border plan that I stood on the floor of the House of Representatives, took arrows from all over, that we were somehow going to risk the speakership. And as a result of that, we were able to put through H.R. 2, the strongest border security bill we've ever moved through. The fact of the matter is, 287G might be something that's required to be enforced, but there's 2 counties right now doing it the way they're supposed to. As Attorney General, I'll be working to enforce those counties, enforce the law, and make sure that those counties do what they're supposed to do on 287G. And the last thing, declare an invasion, do it quickly, and mean it.
I have a rebuttal, Ally.
Sure, 30 seconds.
So don't be fooled when Chip tells you that he was Paxton's chief deputy and he wants to cite his record there. Remember, he was so ineffective, so bad at serving as Paxton's deputy that Paxton fired him. Now that's not often covered in the media, but I hope that the media pool does their due diligence, because they will realize that even though he wants to cite that experience, it was so bad he shouldn't be running on it today.
Congressman, would you like to respond? 30 seconds.
Well, that's simply not true. But I know someone who both of us work for that's endorsed me, and that's Senator Ted Cruz. And he has put his full confidence in me to serve as the Attorney General of Texas, Ted having served as Solicitor General for this great state. He knows what is necessary in that office, and I'm proud to have his full support and endorsement.
Thank you. Now I invite our first guest question for tonight's debate from Iowa Attorney General Brenna Bird.
Since the horrific October 7th attack, we've seen a disturbing rise in anti-Semitism across the United States, from threats against synagogues and Jewish schools to harassment on college campuses. As Attorney General of Iowa, I launched a statewide task force to stop anti-Semitism, and I also led amicus briefs supporting the families impacted by the heinous October 7th attack, and stood with President Trump to hold universities accountable for failing to protect Jewish students. Other Republican AGs are also fighting anti-Semitism. All 28 Republican AGs sent a letter to Attorney General Bondi and FBI Director Patel to help stem the tide of domestic terrorism. And just this month, Attorney General Paxton filed lawsuits to end operations of the Muslim Brotherhood and its American chapter KEYE. What specific steps would you take as Texas Attorney General to stop the evils of anti-Semitism?
Senator Middleton, we'll start with you.
So I'm already in this fight. We have seen it firsthand. It actually happened in my Senate district in Dickinson ISD, where a teacher wrote from the river to the sea. And that is why I've fought to enhance the definition of anti-Semitism with the IHRA definition, where now college campuses and K-12 schools, it's a violation of their code of conduct, but it's got to be enforced, and that is exactly what I will do. Because what we're talking about earlier, with Islamification and Sharia law. The things that we're seeing, like in Plano ISD, those are a symptom of the problem. They even had swastikas written on the side of a banned vehicle at Plano ISD. Teachers that do that, that tolerate that, they need to be fired. They need to be added to a do not hire list and prohibited from ever teaching a student again. Zero tolerance for this, because this is saying that an entire people does not deserve the right to exist because of their faith.
Mr. Wrights.
Anti-Semitism is an unmitigated evil and has to be stopped wherever it rears its ugly head. There are two things that the Attorney General can do moving forward. Number one, he can continue to do the great work that Attorney General Paxton is already doing. As Attorney General Byrd already pointed out, the volume of litigation and investigations that Ken Paxton is pumping out of the AG's office is tremendous. He's looking at K through 12 public school districts. He's looking at institutions of higher education. He's looking at Sharia adjacent organizations like CARE and the Muslim Brotherhood. All of these entities that want to hurt Christians and Jews have to be stopped. The tools are available, but we need to make sure that we get the succession planning right, from Paxton, who's doing a great job, to his endorsed successor. The second thing that the Attorney General has to do is partner with the Trump administration. When I was the head of the Office of Legal Policy at DOJ, I helped Attorney General Bondi create the October 7th task force, the anti-Semitism task force. As someone who just came from the administration, I'm uniquely positioned to bring those federal resources to bear to get rid of anti-Semitism in Texas.
Congressman.
As the chairman of the Subcommittee on the Constitution, we held hearings on this and brought forward students who were receiving the wrong end of the shameful anti-Semitism being directed at them on college campuses around the country. So one of the first things that I did as some of this stuff was unfold was reach out to my friends, for example, Jim Davis, who's the president of the University of Texas, who I was proud to hire and work with at the Office of Attorney General, to work with them to stop what was going on with this nonsense with the Palestinian protest that was going on with respect to Israel. But here's the most important thing. We've already talked about Sharia law. We've already talked about the Muslim Brotherhood and CARE, and we need to do those things. We don't need to repeat that, but you have to do it. You have to stand unequivocally alongside Israel. You have to be willing to stand up and say that you stand with them in the face of all of the hatred being directed toward them. There are segments of our population who don't want to do that today. I am proud to stand alongside our brothers and sisters in Israel, and will do that as Attorney General.
Senator Huffman.
There, of course, is no place at all for anti-Semitism, ever. It's hatred, it's evil, and, I look at it as, we got to protect our kids from that. I mean, because I think that is taught at an early age, right? And then it kind of festers and it moves on. So as an Attorney General, I would look at what Paxton's done. I don't know if he's doing a great job on this or not, but I would certainly dig into it and make sure that we were doing everything we could, if it would be to join with other attorney generals around the country, then we would want to do that. Would it be to work with President Trump? Yes. Would I talk to all the university chancellors and presidents in Texas? Yes, I know all of them. I've worked with them for years on many major issues, including campus free speech, which I wrote the strongest campus free speech in the country back in 2019, was actually invited to the White House to speak on it. So there's a lot we can do, but it's a very, very important issue.
Thank you. Next, the abortion debate. Under the Biden administration, the FDA removed a requirement that the abortion pill, mifepristone, must be dispensed in person at a medical facility. While the Trump administration has announced a review of the FDA's decision, the guidance has not been reversed. As a result, thousands of unborn children in Texas continue to die via mail-order abortion pills. So as Attorney General, how would you ensure the protection of Texas babies, even when doing so may put you at odds with the Trump administration? Mr. Wrights.
Human life begins at conception and ought to end at natural death. That's my bottom line view of the issue. Now, legally, I'm the only one on this stage with a legal record, not a legislative record, a legal record fighting against the cult of death coming out of the radical left, and in particular, the Biden administration. Not only did I partner with Attorney General Paxton to stop various abuses of federal overreach to cram abortion down Texans' throats. But I also stood in a defensive posture when my colleagues were working on their various pieces of legislation and the governor signed the bill and the ink dried. It then became my and Attorney General Paxton's job to go vindicate those laws in court. You can pass all the pro-life laws that you want all day, but if you don't have a battle-tested legal fighter, a true MAGA attorney, as President Trump described me, your laws don't mean anything. I'm ready to defend this stuff in court.
Congressman.
One of the first things we did when I was first Assistant Attorney General was defend the state of Texas HB2 legislation in the United States Supreme Court. Some of us have indeed been there. As a member of Congress, I've got an unassailable pro-life record. Proud to be endorsed by Abby Johnson, by Students for Life, and I bring up Students for Life for a reason. When I first got to Congress, I sat down with them and introduced legislation to pull funding away from universities for the distribution of mifepristone. The sad truth is, too many conservatives want to pat themselves on the back for defunding Planned Parenthood when we have more babies being killed today with a pill than through Planned Parenthood. So we need to act, and the states need to pressure the FDA to get it right. That's why I joined a press conference with senators and congressmen last week, and I've been pushing on the FDA to get them to act, and I'll do that as Attorney General.
Senator Huffman.
We do need to push on the FDA to get them to act. And I will say that this is, abortion has been left to the states, so let us make our laws and let us enforce them. As far as the out-of-state sales, I would aggressively go after those who are openly mailing these pills to the women in Texas. I look at it this way. If there was a manufacturer who was openly saying, I'm sending toys laden with lead paint to the children of Texas, nobody would look at us twice if we tried to enforce and said, no, you can't do that, and use every law in our power, everything passed by the legislature to stop it. So, as an Attorney General, I will aggressively try to stop this, and I'm unequivocal in that.
Senator Middleton.
I'm 100% pro-life. That's why I've been endorsed by Texas Right to Life. And abortion is murder, period. Let me be blunt and simple with that. And these abortion pills are killing babies. That is why I fought to change the law this past year to stop them from flooding our state. They were coming from New York, they were coming from California, and they were killing thousands of innocent unborn babies in Texas. And life begins at fertilization, not just conception. They're throwing away embryos as well, right? We've got to make sure that stops also. And I have led the charge on this. I helped author the Heartbeat Act, which stops abortion from the moment a heartbeat is detected. Also, the ban on abortion in 2021. It is a crime. Furnishing the means to an abortion is a crime, and I will prosecute to the fullest extent of the law, and I will use every civil means possible, including the new KEYE actions that we just passed with the ban on out-of-state abortions to stop those shield laws that we've seen in New York and California that have attempted to defeat Texas's pro-life laws.
Thank you. Next, we'll focus on the damage caused by transgender ideology. Many young Texans have suffered irreversible damage to their bodies caused by doctors who prescribed them puberty blockers, administered cross-sex hormones, and performed surgeries such as double mastectomies. In 2023, Texas banned these practices for minors. So, as Attorney General, how will you ensure affected Texans can seek justice against the doctors who brutalized them? Congressman.
Well, thank you for the question. I'm proud to have the endorsement of Chloe Cole. Chloe, I got to know when she came to testify about the brutal treatment that was levied against her. It's the first time I've seen significant members of Congress on the dais breaking down in tears on the testimony of someone coming before them. And the fact is, I've sat down with Chloe to understand what we can do. And we need to have aggressive legislation and aggressive defense of our laws in the state of Texas. Now, the state of Texas has taken action. I'm not sure if it's far enough, but I want to address something here. I've been criticized for allegedly not being strong enough on this issue, despite supporting legislation to remove funding and to stop these terrible procedures, and they're grotesque. I stood up to try to improve legislation in December that is currently dead in the United States Senate, and to make it something that we could pass with a funding string rather than what my opponents want to criticize me for. The truth matters, and I've stood up alongside those victims, and I will do it as Attorney General.
Senator Huffman.
Well, I think the important word here is victims, because clearly these young people who were confused, trapped into making these decisions, tricked into the decisions, whatever it was horrible. I remember one night, I don't know what it was, we were debating on the Senate floor about whether or not we were going to pass this bill which prevented genital mutilation of children. I looked at one of my colleagues, Senator Donna Campbell, and I said, I can't believe we're doing this. I cannot believe in America, in Texas, that we are talking about this and we have to make a law against it. It is horrifying to me. So, will I fight it? Will I use every tool? Will I work with the legislature to make sure there are civil remedies for these victims? Yes, because I've always stood up for victims, and this is just another class of victims that I would fight for.
Senator Middleton.
This is child abuse, period. It's that simple. And the left is coming for our kids. That is why I've been fighting my entire career to protect them from this evil practice, and that's what it really is. This is evil. They're mutilating children, and they're fighting to do it, and they're willing to resort to violence, to perpetrate this on our most innocent. And Texas banned child transgender surgeries. And since I was referenced earlier, I will address this. There was a bill in Congress, and it banned it outright. It was a very strong bill. Chip Roy had an amendment that would have allowed it to continue. It would have rewarded the transgender lobby. It would have rewarded Gavin Newsom and allowed these private transgender surgeries to continue in those blue states. And it was under a states' rights argument, but I'm sorry, there is no right to hurt a child. No right to hurt a child. Additionally, we need to make sure that we ban this completely. And I've been fighting against evil. I'm not just fighting against taxpayer-funded evil, and that's what his amendment would have done, and it's why Terry Schilling, who runs APP, said there was no greater ally to the transgender lobby than Chip Roy.
Mr. Wright.
Yeah, I'm glad that the Texas legislature has banned these sorts of monstrous procedures. But that couldn't have happened but for Attorney General Paxton and I providing the legal framework to give the lines within which the legislature colored. I'm proud of the fact that I was the lead author under Attorney General Ken Paxton's opinion that defined unequivocally these trans procedures as child abuse under the Texas Family Code. Once we provided the legislature with that guidance, they finally acted. Now, I hope that I get a minute in rebuttal to say this too. Mays is exactly right about Chip. Chip did what exactly President Trump described about him, which was to make a mountain out of a molehill, to grandstand, to make nothing out of an issue. Why? Only to concede ground to the trans lobby. That's Chip Roy.
Congressman, would you like to respond? 30 seconds.
So the legislation in question was authored by Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was leaving Congress 2 weeks later and who has since gone on a tirade attacking President Trump. The fact of the matter is that legislation is dead. It is dead in the United States Senate, and it will not do any of the things that my opponents say it will do because it won't become law. The fact of the matter is, we had an amendment that was supported by a significant number of Republicans that would have stopped these grotesque procedures for being funded with taxpayer funds. And it is amazing to listen to Republican attorneys general candidates standing up saying they want massive federal laws to step over the state of Texas. That is a new frontier.
Thank you. Moving on. How specifically will you hold accountable any institutions that fail to protect the right of women and girls to sex-exclusive spaces and athletic teams? Senator Huffman.
Well, absolutely. We're going to protect women and their right to personal and private spaces. That's a long fight that we've had in Texas. It literally started, I think, almost 6 or 7 years ago with Senator Colcourse. It was crazy because the fight was such that, again, one of those fights that you got to wonder where people have lost their common sense and dignity. But I would do everything I could as Attorney General to make sure that all the public places that are under this law must respect the right of women to have privacy, whether it's schools, institutions of higher education, athletic locker rooms, whatever it may be. I think the Attorney General needs to step in. Again, work with school administrators, work with those who run public buildings, public offices, and make sure that the law is being completely followed. It's just a matter of, it's not just the rights of women, it's just the right of a human being to their privacy and personal space, and it makes sense.
Senator Middleton.
The transgender lobby is the most violent and deranged you've ever met in your life. They are trying to undermine not just basic biological truths, but basic biblical truths. And that's why I have taken them on since day one and authored and passed the strongest Texas women's privacy law ever. It is a $125,000 per day fine if a man tries to go into a woman's private space like a restroom or a locker room or a shower. This is about protecting our wives, our daughters, and all the future daughters of our great state. And it's common sense as well. This is how we make sure Texas is the safest state in America to live and raise a family. And I will never stop until their agenda is defeated and we never hear about it again.
Thank you. Mr. Reitz.
I think this is an issue where all four of us on stage are going to be in total agreement on what is right and wrong. We all know that biological boys and men should not be in the private spaces of biological girls and women, period. That's easy. That's low-hanging fruit. I also like the fact that two of my colleagues here on stage in the Senate have worked on bills to ensure that that common sense reality is upheld. What they have never done in their lives is litigate, investigate, sue, or appeal against a school district, a political subdivision, a governmental agency, a public official, anyone taking those bills on offense. I'll say this again, and I'm going to keep threading this needle in a lot of my responses. You can pass all the legislation you want. You can get all the A+ ratings that you want from all the right groups, and I like that. But if you've never turned those statutes into offensive or defensive weapons throughout the justice system, you ain't ready to be Attorney General. And I'm the only one with the record who's done it.
Congressman.
Well, everybody on the stage, I'll agree, finds this grotesque and would enforce the laws of the state of Texas. I know I certainly would. It's our job as Attorney General. But one of the most important roles of a state leader and as Attorney General is use of the bully pulpit. And one of the things you have to do with this sickness is expose it. So it's important to point out that Leah Thomas is in fact a dude. And you have to be willing to stand up on the floor of the House or in court or in public square and say it. You can't let it just slide by. And you have to do as I did, which is help a friend who was dealing with a transgender individual taking kids and take them to a drag show happy hour, find that individual, expose that individual on the libs of TikTok, and then make that individual get removed from their position of authority in schools. We have a role to expose it, highlight it, and take it out.
Our next guest question comes from West Virginia Attorney General J.B. McCuskey.
Thank you guys all for your commitment to Texas, and hopefully we will be welcoming one of you guys into our ranks. People are fleeing blue states like California because of their laws that make the lives of Californians harder and more expensive. And many are seeking refuge in Republican-led states exactly like Texas. That's why Republican attorney generals are fighting to make sure that blue state regulations don't follow them when they cross our borders. Last February, I led a lawsuit filed by 22 of my colleagues suing New York over their Superfund law, which demands that energy producers, even those who don't operate in New York, pay $75 billion in retroactive fines. Other Republican attorney generals like me have filed similar lawsuits against a variety of blue states like Vermont, California, Illinois, you name it, who have followed in New York's footsteps trying to create these Superfund laws. Now that President Trump and Secretary Zeldin are reining in the EPA to comply with its own legal mandates, these states intend on becoming their own EPA, passing laws that hurt states that are the epicenters of traditional carbon-based fuels like West Virginia and Texas. As Texas Attorney General, what will you do to push back against blue state overreach and help protect carbon-based fuels like oil, gas, and coal to ensure that America leads the world in energy production and that Americans have access to reliable and affordable energy?
Thank you, Attorney General. Senator Middleton.
Yeah, so defeating the Green New Scam has always been one of my top priorities because that's really what it is. This is about Texas's energy dominance. What is keeping the lights on here tonight? What kept the lights on during the freeze a few weeks ago? It was oil and gas, hydrocarbons. Energy density matters. We don't need to be importing Chinese-made solar panels and Chinese-made wind turbines. I've already fought the Green New Scam and won, and passed a law this session to stop wind farms up and down the Texas Gulf Coast. And I'll add this as well. People always ask, what are we going to do with all the turbine blades that we're not using right now? Well, why don't we make them, send them down to the border and use them to finish the wall? It'll be the first time the left has ever opposed recycling, I promise you that. But we've got to make sure we think outside the box here, because this is our lifeblood. It's what funds our schools, either through severance taxes, mineral tax appraisals. It's how the state has its surplus. This is jobs. It's millions of jobs. It's opportunity. And I teach my kids every single time I see a tanker go out the ship channel low in the water. That's America taking money from countries that hate us.
Mr. Reitz.
I've been at the very cutting edge throughout the justice system, fighting against blue state overreach and environmentalist activists. When I was Attorney General Paxton's deputy, leading 46 lawsuits against the 46th president and winning 85% of those lawsuits, a quarter of those lawsuits were on environmental regulations, on what the Biden administration was trying to cram down on Texas, to destroy our oil and gas economy, to push the Green New Scam on us, to push subsidies on us. I know how to fight against these forces and win. Not only did I do it as Paxton's deputy, but I also did it when I was a senior executive at the Justice Department, when one of President Trump's very first executive orders was to roll back the Biden-era environmental litigation that was oppressing oil and gas exploration and production. And as the head of the Office of Legal Policy, I worked with the Environment and Natural Resources Division at DOJ to roll it back. And as the next Attorney General, we are also going to turn our attention to the local environmentalists that want to obscure local ordinances to stop exploration and production. On my watch, we're going to drill, baby, drill.
Congressman.
Well, thank you. In 2015, as the first Assistant Attorney General, we were proud to work with West Virginia to challenge the so-called Clean Power Plan. And that was impressive and important litigation that was built upon the team that you develop when you work together among attorneys general across multiple states. And that's one of the important things that is so great about this organization. The second thing that I think is important to know is you've got to be willing to stand up and fight when it counts. Last May, when the big, beautiful bill was moving forward, the Green New Scam subsidies that we were going to repeal and undo were being put back in by a handful of senators and members of Congress. 4 of us in the Budget Committee stood up and said no. And the entire world, all of the eyes were on us, from the White House to the Speaker's office, and we said no. And we were able to get those Green New Scam subsidy repeals put back in that bill. You need someone who will stand up and fight when it counts, regardless of the arrows being tossed at them.
Senator.
Well, I will always stand up for Texas business, Texas opportunities, and opportunities for Texans to have some relief from energy prices in any way that I can. Maybe one of the first things I would do is to call you and say, how do I join in on this? How does Texas continue to be part of this movement with the Republican Attorneys General Association? And, you know, you have to be able to say, look, it doesn't really matter who the president is or who's in power, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, because there can be overreach and bad ideas that hurt your state. My instance, it would be Texas, no matter who the administration is, right? And so to the extent that some blue state's lame brain idea is going to step on the toes of Texans, you're darn right, I'm going to fight. I'll join with all the allies I can And I will be at the front with the shield and the sword. So let's go.
Crime is a top concern for many Texans. Would you use the Attorney General's office to investigate or challenge district attorneys if their leniency appears to be contributing to rising violent crime? Mr. Reitz.
Totally. Crime is spiking in Texas, in all of our big blue cities and our big blue counties. We're talking right now in Dallas County, where this district attorney is one of the worst in the state, if not the nation. He is part of a network of Soros-funded district attorneys who are intentionally and maliciously not prosecuting crimes, abusing their prosecutorial discretion, turning a blind eye, encouraging light sentences, and our families and our communities are the victims of their malfeasance. That is a violation of their oath. It is a violation of state law. It is a violation of the local ordinances and statutes to which they are bound. As Attorney General, I have committed from day one that within the first month of taking office, I will seek the removal of the Dallas County District Attorney, Travis County District Attorney, and Harris County District Attorney, because I will not allow these awful leftist, insurrectionist, communist, Soros-funded district attorneys turn Texas into something it never was designed to be.
Thank you. Congressman.
Well, I was visiting with Crime Stoppers down in Houston a couple of weeks ago, and they told me a statistic that should turn your head. And that is that there are 222 Houstonians who have been murdered over the last 7 years by multiple-time felons who were released and back out on the streets in Houston. That can't happen in Texas. This is Texas. And the fact is, we've got DAs and judges that are allowing it to happen. So of course we should enforce the law, and we should make sure that DAs and judges are held to account. I think the legislature ought to give greater authority to the governor, like Governor DeSantis out in Florida, to remove recalcitrant DAs and to have greater flexibility to do that. And we ought to be able to do that to judges. But importantly, I think the governor's been right when he's been talking about a state prosecutorial function. The Office of Attorney General has prosecutors' assistants. But for a state the size of Texas, with the 8th biggest economy in the world, with over 30 million people, we ought to be able to have a function and not have to rely on Department of Justice as a backstop, but a state function to be able to make sure bad guys are in jail, that gang members are in jail, that cartel members are in jail, and not on our streets harassing the people of Texas.
Senator Huffman.
Well, there's a reason why I've been endorsed by Texas Crime Victims United and all the major law enforcement agencies in the state of Texas. That's because I've been fighting this fight for a very long time, for almost 40 years now. And recently in the Texas Senate, in the legislature, we finally got past some major bail reform where we can hold those violent offenders from multiple offenders who commit violent crimes without bail. So thank you for bringing that up, Congressman Roy. And we've done other major things, but it's going to take time for all this to go into place. As far as the rogue prosecutors go, I wrote that bill. That was the bill I wrote. And it cannot be done on day one like some claim they're going to do, or in the first month. It is a process. It's a constitutional and statutory process. Are there bad DAs? Yes. But I will say the vast majority of the prosecutors in this state are great people who have their constituents' good will at heart, their best interest at heart. I don't want us to ever forget that.
Senator Middleton.
Look, this is why this is so important. Our laws, our Constitution, those are not suggestions. And anytime a district attorney is treating it that way, which they are, right? They're not prosecuting criminal trespass in Travis County, for example. The list goes on. They have violated their oath of office because they were supposed to put their hand on the Bible to protect and defend all of our laws, all of the Constitution. And when they're choosing not to do that, they're choosing to violate their oath, and they should be removed from office. It is that simple. They have disqualified themselves. We also have to have that backup power to prosecute, right? Because families are suffering, communities are suffering, children are suffering. And I wholly support Governor Abbott's idea for a statewide prosecutor. In addition, I would like to see for the AG be able to prosecute any violation of state law, which would require a change in the legislature. And I've been endorsed by 51 Trump-endorsed legislators. I'm best equipped to make that happen.
Thank you.
Allie, if I could rebut, Senator Huffman made reference
Sure,
to
30
something you
seconds.
said. So this idea that I'm saying things that can't be done is exactly the sort of loser mentality why Republicans often don't win. I'm the only one on this stage who, in my position at both DOJ and as Paxton's deputy, who has wielded the tools and the weapons of the law in creative ways. Don't be fooled by the kind of Republican that says, it can't be done, we have to go through a process. If you have the courage to get something done in the justice system, as Paxton has shown us for over a decade, you can get it done, and I am going to get it done, despite her misgivings.
Our next question for tonight's debate is from, if you want to use your next response to give response to Mr. Rice, you can. Our next question for tonight's debate is from Stephanie Rowe, founder of Texas Against Fentanyl.
I lost my firstborn and only son, Tucker, in 2021 to fentanyl poisoning. At that time, fentanyl was something many Texas families had never even heard of. To ensure no other parent had to endure that loss, I started Texas Against Fentanyl. And in 2023, Texas passed Tucker's Law, mandating fentanyl education in grades 6 through 12. The Texas Attorney General's office has secured more opioid settlement money than any state in the nation. Yet most Texas schools and grassroots organizations on the front line of this crisis still lack the necessary funds to fully implement Tucker's Law. While other states have used their settlement money to provide funding for grassroots organizations, the Texas Comptroller's Office has sent most of its settlement money to large institutions that already receive significant federal funding, not necessarily the schools and organizations who truly need it. Families are asking whether these abatement funds are being deployed in a way that reflects the urgency of this crisis. As Attorney General, if opioid settlement funds appear misaligned with legislative intent and measurable life-saving outcomes, would you use your authority to demand greater transparency, legal review, or corrective action? And what specifically would that look like?
Thank you, Stephanie. We'll start with Congressman Roy.
Well, Stephanie, obviously, you and I have talked many times, and we all are sorry for your loss, but you've used that loss to try to make the state a better place. And Stephanie and I have worked together and had different functions in and around the Austin area to bring attention to the issue of fentanyl, working with local law enforcement. I'm proud to have the endorsement of a lot of sheriffs and a lot of people around that area, but importantly, doing public service announcements. For example, with Bernie ISD, which I did in the middle of the fentanyl crisis, work with the local law enforcement to bring people attention to it. So what Stephanie's highlighting here is really important. So we get these settlements, we ought to make sure those aren't going to large institutions, but that they're going to make sure that we're getting the job done in the local school districts and that parents are aware of what's going on. When we have a school district like Hayes, where my family lives, and where we had 7 kids die and 14 had to get resuscitated from Narcan in the height of that crisis, that's something that parents didn't know what to deal with. So we held forums, we brought attention to it. As Attorney General, I would use the bully pulpit to do that, and I would fight to make sure the funds were doing that in local districts and schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Huffman, I'll give you a little extra time if you want to give your rebuttal and address the question.
Thank you, and I just was going to comment on his loser comment, saying if it was something that could be done, I would ask the question, it begs the question, that why hasn't Paxton already done it? Then I'll proceed to this very, very serious question. I'm so sorry for your loss. You know, it goes to show that sometimes you write legislation and then you hear from someone and you realize we should have done it a little differently. So when we got that opioid money, I actually passed legislation to create an opioid council and to have, of course, some by the settlement went to counties and local entities. But the money that came to the state, we created this council so that people like you could be heard. But that is a problem. We can fix your problem. I can fix your problem. So, but I'm very, you know, fentanyl has devastated families, and you are an example of them right here. That's why I passed a bill that you know, we all hear one pill kills. Well, yeah, it does. So I passed a bill that if you sell a fentanyl pill that caused the death of an individual, it's now a murder in Texas. I work with Governor Abbott to get that passed in the legislature, and that's the way it should be. What happened to you was, and your family, and is just wrong, and I'm so sorry for your loss.
Senator Middleton.
Stephanie, I'm so sorry. I can't imagine losing a child. I saw you a lot in 2023 in the legislature, and That was a big victory to pass Tucker's Law, but now we've got to make sure it's faithfully enforced, because that money is there to save lives, right? That's why this is really there, to save lives. So another mom like you does not have to ever go through this again. And these are people that mean us harm, right? This is fentanyl that's made in China that was flooding over the border, that cartels were pushing into our communities, and they knew it was killing people, and they knew it was killing people just on the first use, often. And that's why I fought to designate cartels as terrorists, and also for the law that will hold them accountable. And if you're distributing fentanyl and someone dies because of it, then they can be charged with murder, and they should, because that's what it is, murder. Also increasing the criminal penalties for distribution to a first-degree felony, which is 99 years in jail. That's exactly what we should seek anytime we catch these people, because they're destroying lives, they're destroying families, and I can never tell you how sorry I am for the loss of your son.
Mr. Wright.
Stephanie, I mean, this is the first time that you and I are meeting, and I'm heartbroken to hear of your account. I have my own 2 of my 4 kids here with me today, and I'm heartbroken over the thought of a pill that's been taken or something that happens at a party, and before you even know it, a life has just slipped through your fingers prematurely. It's an awful tragedy that has been faced by too many thousands of moms and dads around the country. The fentanyl crisis is not just going against the big pharmaceutical companies, but it's also about securing the border, right? These two things go in tandem. When you have more crime, when you have more drug trafficking, when you have a loose border, when you aren't deporting illegal aliens that are capitalizing on the drug trade and not using, they don't care whether there's trace amounts of fentanyl in what they're pushing on kids. It's a huge problem. This requires a multi-pronged approach. When I was Paxton's deputy, you're exactly right, Stephanie. Attorney General Paxton has brought in hundreds of millions of dollars for the state in opioid settlements, going against big pharma, because big pharma is some of our most legal drug pushers in the nation, and we got to put an end to it.
Okay, let's talk about marijuana. In the past, Texas cities like Austin and Denton have adopted policies to deprioritize or effectively stop enforcing state marijuana laws. So as Attorney General, what would you do if more blue cities refuse to enforce state law? Senator Huffman.
Well, that is one of the reasons why we can move and start the removal process of a prosecutor, a district attorney, is if they refuse to prosecute across the board a class of offenses and so forth. When we passed the rogue prosecutor bill, many of them kind of stepped back and moved back from the policies of actually stating that that's what they were doing. But in effect, it appears that many are doing that. Sometimes when you look a little closer, actually what they're doing is sort of a pretrial diversion type of program where the person is not arrested or maybe given instructions to go to counseling or something along those lines. So they're sort of circumventing the law in a way. And the law did provide so that there could still be some pretrial diversion programs and so forth. And you're talking about, I'm assuming, very low-level offenses. And so as Attorney General, we just have to watch this and make sure it's not an across-the-board class of offense that is of a serious nature and that they are following the law as it relates to pretrial diversions.
Senator Middleton.
I'm a tough-on-crime guy. I'm a law and order guy because that is America first, and it is illegal right now, and THC should remain so. That's why I fought for that in the legislature. I just saw something the other day where up to 40% of traffic accidents, there's THC in the system, even though among traffic accidents there are far less people drinking alcohol, right, or far more people drinking alcohol than are taking THC. So, that shows you the magnitude of this problem. And if you've got a city council, if you've got a commissioner's court that is ignoring our laws, guess what? They need to be removed from office. And I changed the law this session to be able to do exactly that. Because willfully ignoring the law when you know what the law is, that's incompetence per se. And now they'll face the music because they go to the presiding judge of the administrative judicial region, which is an Abbott appointee. No longer do they have the George Soros district judge home field advantage in the county that they represent. There is real accountability now.
Thank you. Mr. Wright.
You know what I'm tired of in our big blue cities and counties is walking down the street and getting overwhelmed with that stink of weed that's everywhere. I hate it. You hate it. You know what I also don't like is seeing now more and more states legalize recreational marijuana, and in our sort of the social, economic, and psychological effects of widespread recreational use of marijuana does to our communities. It increases crime, it increases schizophrenia, it increases all of the other attendant second and third order effects of using hard drugs. By the way, marijuana today is not the marijuana of 50 or 70 years ago. These things are now concocted to be paranoia-inducing hard drugs. I don't like widespread use of recreational marijuana. And if I find that these district attorneys, who I was blasting just a few questions ago, are not prosecuting marijuana offenses, I'm coming after you.
Thank you. Congressman.
Marijuana is illegal. The law should be enforced. Marijuana should be illegal in the state of Texas, and the law should be enforced. If any exception is made or needs to be made for our men and women in uniform for PTSD in a controlled environment and setting, then that is something that should be continued to be considered. But at the end of the day, we should be enforcing the law in the state of Texas.
Thank you. Despite Texas's anti-gambling laws, $5 to $20 billion is reportedly wagered annually in Texas through online sports betting and prediction market apps operating in the state. What tools should the Attorney General use to address unlawful betting? Senator Middleton.
So not only is gambling unconstitutional in Texas, it's illegal. And I've already been in this fight with the things that we have seen happen, like with the lottery. Do y'all remember the courier companies where they had these apps on your phone? They were targeting kids, right? They didn't have age verification. Not only that, they had virtual scratch-offs. It was a rogue agency that had to be abolished. And I fought to do exactly that. We've seen it before, though. The Racing Commission, they tried to put slot machines in horse tracks, try to get around the Constitution and our laws. That had to be shut down. So, you know, the list goes on and on and on, but they will always attempt to illegally expand gambling, and I will use the AG's office to stop them.
Thank you. Mr. Reitz.
Well, newsflash to the guy who's never practiced law a day in his life. If something is unconstitutional, it is illegal. It's not also those things, okay? Gambling is both unconstitutional and illegal, they're synonyms, in the state of Texas. For people that want to change that, that is the legislature's job. And so I appreciate actually Chip's answer just a minute ago with respect to marijuana use. The Attorney General is the chief legal officer of Texas. He doesn't change the law. He doesn't have a lot of room to interpret the law. He doesn't adjudicate the law. He enforces the law. And right now, gambling is illegal. Casino-style gambling is illegal and ought to be illegal. Anybody telling you that the introduction of casino-style gambling, to put a Las Vegas-style strip right here in Dallas, and is telling you that it's going to make the state millions and millions of dollars, for every dollar that is allegedly profited from that degenerate industry, you're talking about hundreds of additional dollars in substance abuse, human trafficking, sex trafficking, crime, gangs, bankruptcies, financial failures, broken marriages, alcoholism, the whole 9 yards.
Thank you.
I don't
Congressman.
like it.
Gambling is illegal in Texas. The law should be enforced. Gambling should be illegal in Texas. The law should be enforced. And to the extent that there's the questions surrounding sports betting, the current interpretation by the Office of Attorney General in terms of letter opinions is that in fact sports betting is gambling. So we should enforce the law in the Office of Attorney General and wait for the legislature to make any changes the legislature sees fit.
Senator Huffman.
I would agree with the congressman. And look, I've always been against the expansion of gambling since I first came in to office back in 2008. This is a perennial question. It comes up, everybody talks about it. It's about to pass. It never does. That's because the will of the legislature, the votes in the legislature are not there for it to pass. It is against the law. As Attorney General, I will enforce the law. Look, we all know there's sports betting going on all the time. There's probably people here with it on their phone, right? I don't know why anyone at the AG's office hasn't looked at it a little closer and asked the question, are these people breaking the law? It looks to me like they are, but it'd be something that I would look into, because until the legislature changes the law statutorily and constitutionally, it is a violation of the law, and I don't see how sports betting is any different than casino gambling.
Our next question for tonight's debate comes from Kansas Attorney General Chris Kobach.
Good evening, and I wanted to ask you a question about something that concerns me a great deal, and that's the threat posed by the Chinese Communist Party, which some say is theoretical, but it's not. It's right here, it's right now, here at home. They've been trying to purchase American farmland in states like Kansas and neighboring states, including Texas, especially farmland near military bases. They've engaged in intellectual property theft. They've exploited U.S. universities. They've exploited weaknesses in our supply chains, and they're actively working to undermine our sovereignty and security. As Kansas Attorney General, I've taken some concrete steps to push back against the CCP's influence, most notably drafting and pushing through a bill that became law restricting ownership of land within 100 miles of any military base or sensitive site. And now I'm enforcing that law, and we're already seeing some very disturbing patterns in that land ownership. Other attorneys general, including those here tonight, have actively fought against the threats posed by the CCP. Last week, 19 Republican attorneys general urged the Justice Department to investigate 5 foreign nonprofits, including one with documented ties to the CCP, which accepted over $2 billion in foreign dark money to promote extreme environmental policies in the states, all intended to undermine American energy independence. So as Texas Attorney General, it will fall to you to be responsible to protect the state from the CCP insofar as you can in the various ways that they may try to weave their way into Texas. So what specific steps would you take as Texas Attorney General to stop the CCP from infiltrating, to take control over Texas land, and doing other things that might make Texas a foothold for their influence in the United States?
Thank you, Attorney General Kobach. Mr. Reitz.
While Sharia is the greatest civilizational threat that we're confronting right now, China and its ruling Chinese Communist Party is the greatest geopolitical threat that we're facing right now. And they are reaching out the tentacles of its red dragon directly into Texas. They want to exploit us, they want to undermine us, they want to demoralize us, and they want to do it at a high dollar value. I'm proud that Texas has banned the incursion of the CCP into land sales, critical infrastructure, and important technologies. I'm also proud of the fact that Attorney General Paxton is already leading the way and showing what it looks like to muster the full weight of the Attorney General's office to investigate the pushers of CCP spy technologies, and is actively litigating against them. If we want to continue that fight, you need Paxton's endorsed successor to do that. And you need someone who just came from the Justice Department to partner with the federal resources to make it a full frontal assault on the CCP. The
Thank
Red
you.
Dragon's head is getting
Congressman.
chopped off on my watch.
In 2019, as a freshman member of Congress, I talked to my staff about how ridiculous it was that we weren't stopping the CCP from owning land, and not just within 100 miles of military bases, but generally. So I introduced legislation to ban ownership of lands by the Chinese Communist Party or anybody affiliated with it. Now, everybody at the time said, well, that's awfully, aggressive. What are you doing that for? Because we should. And it matters if you lead. It was the first bill that was put out there. It was the first bill to get traction. And then we were able to get some legislation and some of our funding bills, and states took action subsequent to that. But also remember the importance of standing up when it matters, when there's a lot of pressure against you. For example, standing up on TikTok. It mattered that some of us in Congress stood up and said, no, the Chinese Communist Party is not going to be able to comb over all of the information and the data collected on our children and use it by virtue of TikTok. So now we've gotten some reforms in place. And by the way, I think we need to go further. We need to review all that's been happening with the deal making. But it's important that we look at the corporations, the corporate ownership. And by the way, it's not just the Chinese Communist Party. I don't know why any foreign nationals, frankly, are able to own American land, and we should go further.
Senator Huffman.
Well, I would agree with you that definitely the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese, a threat to America, to Texas, and to your state. And so recently in the Texas legislature, Senator Kolkhorst, I joint authored the bill with her, passed one of the strongest bills in the country against disallowing foreign ownership of state land, of land in Texas. And it gave significant authority to the Attorney General to enforce that. And that's great, and I would certainly follow up with that. But I think it's so new to us that we need to dive in, we need to do an assessment of what's out there, because I don't think we really know, right? It's been going on, to your point, for so long. We need to work with the Land Commissioner's Office, look through the data, figure out who owns what and where, and do a serious assessment as Texans so that we have that information and then go about the procedures that have been put in place by the legislature to actually enforce this law.
Senator Middleton.
This is a national security issue, and they mean us harm. That law did not pass in 2023, by the way, and I'll never forget getting phone calls in my office saying, I'm afraid to show up and testify for this bill stopping China from buying our land because of what could happen to our family back in China. Does that not show you we're on the right side of this? But not only that, we found out that WeChat, which is a Beijing-based social media company, was interfering with that law, trying to stop it, organizing the opposition through Jean Wu, who's actually in the Texas House, working with mainland China. They mean us harm, and they interfered with the Texas legislative process. But I was on that conference committee. We got it done this time, and there was something very important I wanted in there, and that was to make sure that the AG has the power to bring an action to force them to divest of this real property. Not just land, minerals, water, timbers, the list goes on. And it's an in-rem action that we have to have, and I will enforce to make sure these enemy entities do not buy Texas out from underneath us. It is that simple. This is Texas first.
Thank you. Our final few questions for tonight. Should Texas adopt a closed primary system, and what role should the Attorney General play in that process? Congressman.
Yes, and enforce the law.
Got it. Senator Huffman.
Well, I think the legislature needs to write that law so the Attorney General would know what to enforce and how to enforce it. And they have not to this point. So I think we'll wait and see what the legislature does, but I would enforce any law that the legislature passed.
Senator Middleton.
Well, I'm one of only 2 people that have filed the closed primary bill. Look, this is important to me. My first election in 2018, I'll never forget. Knocking on a door in Lamarck, Texas. This is in the general, November. This is my list, who's voted in the Republican primary. And I knock on the door and say, oh, I'm not a Republican. I don't vote Republican. Well, you did this March. Oh, yeah, they paid me to vote for your opponent in the primary. Right? They're doing that to get more liberals elected. And this is why this issue is so near and dear to my heart. We've got to make sure that only conservatives are voting. Why are we giving Democrats the opportunity to vote in our primary? This doesn't make sense.
Thank you. Mr. Wright.
100% close the primaries. Republican primaries should be for Republicans, not for liberals, not for Democrats, not for people who are coming into our party business to try and screw around with our elections to choose our best Republicans. That's our business. I'm proud of the fact that Attorney General Paxton filed litigation in defense of the Republican Party of Texas and against the Secretary of State in her defense of a facially unconstitutional provision in the Texas Election Code that these 2 senators, well, maybe just one senator, because I'll give May some credit here for trying to fix that, but this is a First Amendment freedom of association issue. This is not just quibbling over the words in a statute. Our party has the right to freely associate with whomever we want. It's a First Amendment issue. And while I did a moment ago give Mays some credit for attempting to pass that law, even if he had got it through, what no one on this stage has ever done is successfully litigate First Amendment appeals or litigation at the district court or up to the U.S. or Texas Supreme Court. That's the issue. have you litigated First Amendment issues? On this stage, I'm the only one, once again, the only one who has successfully done it. And I'll continue to keep my foot on the gas in the same direction as Ken Paxton.
If a U.S. Supreme Court seat opens up during Trump's second term, whom do you think he should nominate? We'll start with you, Senator Huffman.
I didn't hear the very beginning of what you said. I'm sorry.
If a U.S. Supreme Court seat opens up during Trump's second term, whom do you think he should nominate?
Oh, wow. That's a tough question.
I know, and you had the least amount of time to think about it. That's okay.
That's okay. I hope it's a very qualified conservative woman, but I can't think of one right now. But I'm sure there's tons of them out there.
Senator Middleton.
I'm gonna hurt some feelings here, but Kazmierek, Judge Kazmierek.
Okay, Mr. Wrights.
Ted Cruz, but even though he said he won't do it. Now, here's the important thing, okay? The Texas Attorney General is the kind of office where he will be consulted with the White House counsel's office, with the President of the United States. And I'm going to work exceptionally hard. And I'm the only one with the jurisprudential backing and the understanding of the nuances of the constitutional issues at play that will inform who we choose for our next Attorney General. This will be the first ride for some of my colleagues. With me, I've done this for my whole career. And so I'm going to be up in the White House as often as I can and make sure we get a hardcore originalist champion up on the bench.
Congressman.
In October of 2005, as I mentioned earlier, I got a phone call that Harriet Miers was nominated to the United States Supreme Court. And about 10 of us took immediate action to freeze the United States Senate Judiciary Committee. I believe history has been changed as a result of that leadership to ensure that we're able to stop, review, and get Sam Alito on the court. The decisions that we're getting today out of the court are a product of that. That's why it matters to lead at the time that you're faced with something and a difficult question. If you're asking me who should be on the court, it's not my place, it's the president's. I do think there's an enormous bench in the Fifth Circuit. I know this well because these are all people I've worked with. I worked with Jim Ho on the Senate Judiciary Committee. I worked with Reed O'Connor on the Senate Judiciary Committee. I hired Brantley Starr, who's now a federal judge, into the Office of Attorney General. I've got great friends in Washington, but I don't think Senator Cruz would take the job. And I might say Senator Mike Lee if I was going to just throw a name out there as one of my best friends in Washington.
There we go. Our last question addresses the scope of the Attorney General's power. Texas has seen repeated legal fights over the scope of the Attorney General's authority. What is one major change you would make in how the Attorney General's office exercises power compared with the current Attorney General Paxton's administration? Senator Middleton.
Right, so what we're seeing in Minneapolis right now with the mayor there, the governor, they are getting in the way of ICE. One of the most important things in the AG's office is backing up President Trump in his deportation and border security agenda, because we've got to make sure that we don't just deport some illegal immigrants, we've got to deport all illegal immigrants and use every resource and tool available to do exactly that, because this is about keeping our communities safe. And that's why I fought to restore the power of the AG to prosecute election-related crimes as well, because we all know a George Soros DA is not going to prosecute voter fraud. That's why you've got to have the AG's power to prosecute any violation of our election laws, because that's how we make sure only legally qualified citizens are voting in Texas. And if we don't have that, they'll steal it all from us again, just like they did in 2020.
Mr. Wrights.
The question is not so much what additional powers does the Attorney General need or want. The litigation troops are already arrayed on the battlefield, ready for war. And as we transition from Paxton to the next Attorney General, the only question is who is going to command them at the front? Who is going to be the battlefield, the wartime general, who's going to lift up that banner and take us to victory? I'm the only one in this race who's got the battle scars to prove and the war medals to demonstrate that I have been in this fight leading those troops into legal combat to deliver legal victories for our values, for our state, and our nation. And those troops are going to look to somebody who's got the proof. They're not going to follow somebody who's never practiced law a day in his life and has spent millions of dollars trying to destroy Ken Paxton. They're not going to follow somebody who's tried to destroy Ken Paxton and has opposed President Trump left and right. They're not going to follow somebody who has used a gavel to punish Ken Paxton and hasn't practiced any law in decades. They want somebody who President Trump called a true MAGA attorney and a warrior for the Constitution, and that's Aaron Reitz.
Thank you. Congressman.
Well, importantly, as I mentioned earlier, I don't think that the Office of Attorney General is following the money as much as it could, with the power that it has to look at the nonprofits and the NGOs that are driving the Islamic invasion of the state of Texas and that are driving the Marxist attack on our cities where DAs are putting criminals on our streets. So that's one. Two, and God rest his soul, I don't want to have to count on the Arizona Attorney General to declare an invasion. The state of Texas should declare an invasion when it's being invaded. Number three, open government. One of the most precious things we have is the ability to ask questions of our government, and we're not moving fast enough. We're not delivering answers quickly enough for the people who want to ask questions of their government. We need to do a better job with that. And finally, child support needs to be much more effective, much more efficient, because it is a critical function of the Office of Attorney General. It is 2/3, roughly, or 3/5, roughly, of the size of the office.
Senator Huffman.
Well, I've been talking about this for several months while out on the campaign trail, and that is that over the last decade, there's been a great loss of trust between the Attorney General's office and local prosecutors and local law enforcement. We need to rebuild that trust. With my background as a prosecutor, a judge, my many years I've served on criminal justice in the Senate, all the bills that I've passed, the work that I've done with law enforcement, I can bring back that trust. What does that mean? Not that we step on their toes, not that we try to take their cases, but that the state of Texas, the Attorney General's office, acts as a resource for prosecutions, for investigations, for these crimes that span counties like fentanyl trafficking, human trafficking, cybersecurity crimes, and scams. We see scams for the elderly, the veterans, online scams. All of this is exploding, and it's because there's a lack of kind of unity at the top where we bring people together. And I would focus on that, and I would be effective at it.
Thank you. That will bring us to the end of our questions for tonight. You each have 60 seconds to make your closing statements. We'll start with you, Senator Huffman.
Well, it's been great being here tonight. I've hoped that everyone's had an opportunity to see a little bit of differences in the candidates. You know my background, prosecutor, judge, conservative state senator. But I'll tell you a little bit more personally about me. I'm a woman of faith, and I stand firm in my faith. I'm a happily married woman to the love of my life. I'm the proud mother of a 28-year-old attorney son who is in the active military, serving as a lawyer in the JAG. I've worked very hard all my life. Because I've worked hard, because I've been effective, because I have real results, I have strong support from law enforcement, from prosecutors, from the victims' organizations across the state. They know me, they know Joan, they know that I will fight with every breath of my being to make Texas safe and strong, and you can count on me to do that. I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Congressman.
I'm in this for one reason, and that's to win for the people of Texas. I'm not a trust fund kid spending my family's money. I didn't get a precious Senate-confirmed slot, spend 70 days of the administration so I could ladder climb back home in Texas. What I did do is survive cancer 15 years ago when I was diagnosed with stage 3 Hodgkin's lymphoma. And when I got through the other side of that, through the faith in God and through the love of my wife and family, I promised my kids, I promised my wife that I would leave it all on the battlefield to try to save this great state and this great nation. We cannot lose Texas. We cannot lose Texas or we lose America. We need an Attorney General who will put it all out there, who has a demonstrated track record of success, who is independent and strong, willing to work with this administration, and willing to fight for the people of Texas. That's why I'm asking the people of Texas for their vote.
Mr. Reitz.
The first time I ever swore an oath to the U.S. Constitution was as a brand new second lieutenant in the Marine Corps. I was 22 years old, my hair sadly fast approaching its current state, and I raised my right hand and I said, I, Aaron Reitz, do solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The next time that I swore that oath was in the West Wing, with my wife and 4 kids on my left and the Attorney General of the United States on my right. And I raised my hand and I said the exact same oath. Now, as a younger man, I primarily thought about the foreign threats to our Constitution, and I lived it as somebody who deployed to the Helmand province of Afghanistan. But I had come to fully appreciate that today the primary threats that we are facing are the domestic enemies of the Constitution. And they are fighting a vicious war against us in the justice system. We need an Attorney General who is battle-tested, who is proven, who's been endorsed by Paxton to succeed him, to wage war and win on behalf of our conservative, Republican, Christian, Texas, and American values. And that's Aaron Reitz for Attorney General.
Senator Middleton.
Well, you know what? Let me respond to that. What we don't need is someone as an Attorney General like Chip Roy that has spent 10 years fighting President Trump, defending Liz Cheney, calling us MAGA effers, and we could kiss his you-know-what if we didn't like it. We can't afford that in the AG's office. And look, that's why I'm running here to defend Texas and defeat the left. That's why we showed up tonight. And there's a reason why I'm the only one that's been protested in this AG's race. There's a reason why they've threatened my life and my family's life. There's a reason why the 2 Democrats that are leading in the AG's race can only talk about me. They keep saying, let's stop this MAGA Mays guy. We can't let him win. And not only that, they're saying the #1 law that they will not enforce is the Texas Women's Privacy Law. Why are they doing that? Because the left knows who their true enemy is in this race. I am already defeating the left. That is why we're here tonight. And I'm not retreating from Washington, D.C., because I'm never going to Washington, D.C. I have always known that the fight is here. We don't have another Texas to move to.
Thank you. That's the end of tonight's debate for the Republican candidate for the Texas Attorney General. Thank you to State Senator Mays Middleton, State Senator Joan Huffman, Aaron Reitz, and Congressman Chip Roy. And thank you to the Republican Attorneys General Association for hosting this event. I'm Allie Beth Stuckey. Good night.
Well, the action isn't over just yet. You can capture instant reactions to the debate over at the Blaze TV exclusive post-debate show. Now, if you're not already a Blaze subscriber, you can use code ALLIE40 to get $40 off an annual subscription. That's at blazetv.com, code ALLIE40.
Blaze TV is news, opinion, and entertainment for people who love the American way of life.
Leader Scalise, thank you so much for taking the time today.
I'm Allie Beth Stuckey. I'm surrounded by 20 liberal Christians.
This audience is the reason the news media is no longer the same, because you built a network called The Blaze.
For now,